What is dignity? Well, in order to explain that, what I've learned, I'm going to have to talk about James Arthur Voss. He was born January 23rd, 1948. So we could say he's older than Israel, or he was. And he died May 29th, 2021. So we're going to talk about the dash in between those two dates. James Arthur Voss was my father-in-law. Interesting thing, I met him in 1995 before he was my father-in-law, before I even met his daughter. They were moving his daughter into an apartment below me on a, believe it or not, of all places, a place called Wilson Street. Nell, my wife, her friend Doug, had hit the porch and basically broke it. And I did some rigging and I made the porch look like it was fixed, and it lasted the whole time we lived there in those apartments. But he seemed like a very direct, very positive individual who had a kind of quirky humor, and I can't quite explain his humor. Kind of like an old man humor, but he wasn't an old man, and he had hair. Okay, so fast forward, let's see, 1995, 2005, 2015, 2020. So that's 25 years. 25 years I knew this man, and he's not my real dad. He's not my mom, but he was my friend. And together we learned truths about the world, Bible. We learned a lot of things. He worked a lot when I first met him. He was always going to different places. We actually went out and hung out with him in Nebraska when he was at a job site in Nebraska. He was a controls engineer, and he was sort of an electrician and a computer genius. Put those together. And he was cantankerous and annoyingly stubborn. So yeah, fit right in with the family there. He always had to be in charge, and he never slept. And I didn't know how bad that was until I actually had to take care of this man. Around 2015, 2016, he developed a fungus on his legs. We didn't know what it was. His legs were getting torn apart. So he was going back and forth 2 years, maybe a year and a half between Nell's house and her brother, Jim. And if this is a tribute to Mr. Voss, I'm talking to the family members like Barb and Leanne. I don't mean to be cruel or upsetting to you guys. I just want to say things the way they happened and try to understand what I got out of it and what Nell got out of it. And hopefully we can be at peace with that. Anyway, his legs were horrible. He had a massive heart attack, I believe in 2018, had to go to the hospital, and he had rehab, and coming back from
2019.
Was it 2019?
It was 2019.
Okay. In 2019, he had a massive heart attack. We had to take him to the hospital. It was the second time that I knew him that he had a heart attack. The first time, he wouldn't go to the hospital, and this was when we lived in Wadsworth, Ohio, and I threatened to carry him over my shoulder and take him to the hospital if he didn't get the hell out of that chair and get to the hospital. I know you're not supposed to drive someone to the hospital when they're having a heart attack, but he wouldn't go in an ambulance. So I drove him to the hospital in Wadsworth off Leatherman, and immediately they took him in. They saw that, they took his signs, and they said, he's got to go. So they took him to Akron Hospital immediately, and they took the life flight. So I had a run-in with him having a heart attack in the past. So, I hate to say it, but heart attacks become old school. They're like, yeah, okay, he's having another heart attack. Let's get him to the hospital. We got him to the hospital, and, he survived. They gave him Plavix and all this sort of blood thinners and all these things, and they had to do like triple bypasses, and they had to do stents, and over the course of the 2 or 3 heart attacks that he had while I've known him. And then they put him in this rehab place in Morgantown, West Virginia that just about killed him because the vent from the rest of the whole rehab center was blowing down on him, and they wouldn't take him to the bathroom, and it was a cruel place. We got him out of there as soon as we could, and from that moment on, he lived in my house. In fact, he lived in this room that I'm in right now. And he had all his computer stuff in there. We had a person from our fellowship, and I helped build him a wall so that he could be cut off from the laundry room and he could have a quiet room all to himself. So we built a fake wall here around the perimeter of this wall, and I didn't make it permanent, so I anchored it to the sides, and I didn't mess up the hardwood floor, but it was a really nice wall. Anyway, so he lived in here. My brother-in-law Jim would come over and visit, but they were doing joint custody of my father-in-law, basically. Jim would have him for a couple of years, and Nell would have him for a couple of years. This was after my mother-in-law died. I think she died in 2015, and he was heartbroken. Even though when she was alive, he wouldn't know that he would be heartbroken about Moody was dying. He was. He loved her. Whether or not he was the love of her life, she was the love of his life. And he did a lot of work, and he stayed away from home a lot. But near the end of their time together, they did get to go out and do all these things that they wanted to do. They went to Maine and all these things. Went on a tour of Ohio with their friends, Carol and Bruce. Now, he was living here. He was slowly getting worse with his legs. His legs, and we didn't know this was a fungus, but they were creeping up his legs, and he was having a harder and harder time walking. And we went to wound care, and they just made it worse. Not really any faith in the hospital system or the health system, because they wouldn't figure it out. They wouldn't try to figure it out. And they just kept getting antibiotics, and then they kept saying, well, we've got to put pressure on it. We got to put a leg wrap on it, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you know how much pain he would be in if he had a leg wrap. And then they have to give him morphine, and then they have to do all these other things. Like, no, we're not doing a leg wrap. We need to find out what's causing this. Get a, what do you call it when you take a sample of something?
Specimen.
Yeah, but you call it something, a biopsy. We need to get a biopsy of his legs, and they took a biopsy of his legs and never got back to us on what it was. So eventually he started doing his own thing, and most of it had to do with Porter's salve, you know, the old-fashioned stinky salve. And a little bit this room still smells like it, but he used silver salve and Porter's salve, and Nell was trying to use different health type of items for skincare, but he wouldn't do it. He kept putting Porter's salve on it, and he kept being stubborn. And then my brother-in-law brought up chiggers. Maybe he's got chiggers on his legs. And then, oh no, all of a sudden, you can tell he's starting to get dementia now. My father-in-law started thinking he had insects living in his legs, like spiders were in his legs and other type of bugs. And I know spiders aren't insects.
Tsetse flies.
But tsetse flies, he thought those were in his legs, and chiggers were in his legs. And so he would pick at his scabs and pick till they were bleeding. And they would ask us to look at it under a microscope. And so Nell and I looked at it under our microscope, because we have a microscope. We have two of them probably. We looked, and it's like, you know, it's just skin. There's no bug here. There's no bugs. But he wouldn't believe it. He said, no, I have bugs in my skin. There's gonna be there. They're there. So yeah, his legs got worse and worse and worse. And he started developing dementia, and he was mean to my children. He would say awful things, horrible things, because he thought he was making them stronger, you know, making them, you know, tough, because they had to be tough, you know. They can't be these wimpy kids that, you know, people are growing nowadays that are not taking on life. They don't have a work ethic, and they're lazy, and they got to have focus. They can't be focused on a bunch of different things. Well, my oldest son, Joel, he has a whole bunch of different talents, and my father was trying to get him to focus on one thing. But Nell had it out with him couple times about it. It's like, stop being mean to my children. You have no right to do it. You're not their dad. And so, you know, he backed off for some times, but then he would just have his fits, and he would just be mean to them. And Jolene and Samuel, it's not his fault. He loved you guys, you know, as much as he loved his own daughter. He loved you guys. So it's not because it was in his mind. It was in his mind because that's his work ethic. That's the way his father taught him, and that's the way it's beat into him from his family. So Barb, Leanne, Henry, Ron, I know a lot about your lives because I spent a lot of time listening to your brother. Hours upon hours listening to your brother. He loves all of you. He does. You know, there's disputes with Ron, and he wanted to make things right with you as far as from his side of the thing goes. And Henry, he loved you even though you're a crazy liberal. He still loves you anyway. And, you know, that's pretty good considering all the things that he said about you when he was trying to convince you of things that you wouldn't listen. But he still loved you. You're his brother. And he always cared about you. And he even cared about you, Ron, if Ron ever watches this. And I heard all the stories about Carol. And I know you guys had a rough life. But I'm still going to explain his last days and how I know all about all your lives. I just about went crazy listening to all your lives, but it was the only thing that would keep him sane. It was the only thing that would keep his dementia at bay for a little while. So he got worse. We took him to the hospital in, I can't remember the date, but I think it was in 2019. No. It was in 2020. January of 2020. No, it wasn't January.
Well, we took him to the hospital in 2020, but then we took him to the hospital in 2021 as well.
Right, but he had to go to the hospital because the police wouldn't let us in.
That's 2020. That was like May or June.
Okay, so May of 2020, we had the COVID nonsense. People went crazy. Hospitals went crazy. They got paid money to kill patients. They got paid money to admit a patient with COVID, like $3,000 to $5,000. They got paid money to put him on a ventilator, and that was about $39,000. And they got paid money for a COVID death, which is about $10,000. Now takes him up to Ruby, up in Morgantown, because his legs are so bad. They're getting horrible. So they want to make sure he doesn't have COVID. So they make him sit outside in the van for like half an hour. And then 2 uniformed police officers come up and escort him out of the van. He can't walk. So the police have to help him become orderlies, and the police have to help him in the chair. They won't let Nell, his advocate, his patient advocate, inside the hospital. They won't let her in. Talk about bullshit. And this is what pissed off mostly Americans of the whole Rockefeller hospital system, was that we couldn't see our loved ones. They wouldn't even let chaplains into the hospitals. I was a chaplain at one time. They wouldn't let chaplains in the hospitals. So we have to just hope and pray that they're not going to kill my father-in-law. It's like, okay, he goes in with leg problems, but they're going to say, hey, he died of COVID complications. Yeah, right, bullshit. So we kept calling him every day. Nell kept bugging him. And eventually they let him out. They didn't kill him, thank God. So in the year 2019 and 2020, we came up with a plan, and it was my father-in-law's plan. It was Jim Voss's plan. He says he's not dying in one of those godforsaken hospitals. He's not ever going to the hospital again. But the cool thing was, where we're developing this plan, and that he had to go to the hospital. Thank God he didn't get killed by COVID. They didn't murder him with remdesivir or anything like that, snake poison. He came up with a plan that he didn't want to die in the hospital. So he told Jim, he told Nell, he told me. He's, one, he just say, just shoot me and throw me out back and, bury me in the garden. And I'm like, no, we're not shooting you. I said, well, I'll be in trouble if we shoot you. I said, so you're just going to die like a man. We had this banter back and forth between us. So he told us, he says, I'm not dying in a hospital, and I want you guys, if you're willing to take care of me. And when we got him to the hospital, we showed hospice that he was in such bad shape that hospice actually agreed to help us take care of him. His doctor, Dr. Ong, said that if we don't take him to the hospital, we could be in trouble for mal-neglect or neglect of the patient or neglect of my father-in-law, holding him prisoner, and all this sorts of crap. He says the authorities will be involved. Sort of like, whatever, dude. And then we never, Dr. Ong would see us via video because no one would want to see people in person. Oh my gosh, you could get COVID. That's so horrible, terrible. Now you're gonna be like, my best friend died of COVID. Yeah, I know, people died of COVID. My friends died of COVID too. But it's not what you think it is. The whole scam, we didn't buy into it. People were dying, yes, but not from what you think. So anyway, we get him to the hospital. They show hospice that he actually does need to be admitted to hospice. So he told them his wishes, and Nell was his advocate, and she was a very good advocate. Nell was like a pit bull on these people because they were trying as much as they could to get as much money out of them as they could. Anyway, we get them back here. They buy a bed, not this bed that I'm sitting on. They get him a hospice bed, and the hospice comes in 1 day, 3 days a week to check on him. They check on him every day, and then on weekends we have a number that we can call in case of emergencies. Crazy part was, this is before hospice admitted him. This was January 2021. He had Joel's chili the night before, and he got sick, and this is before we took him to the hospital in Ruby. He couldn't walk, and he had slept in his chair, his black chair. He'd slept at his computer like he does all the time. He'll take little cat naps and he won't sleep. Well, anyway, he fell asleep in his chair and he had diarrhea all over his chair. And I think Ian or one of the boys found him, and they called us down like early in the morning saying, we got a problem. It wasn't Ian. We came down, and oh my gosh, what a mess and what a stink. It was horrible. And we still going. We had to get him across the hall. He could barely walk. Nell and I took both arms. He couldn't make it to the toilet. He sat on the edge of the tub and just let loose. And then we had to get him over to the toilet, set him on the toilet, and then I had to clean up all this stuff. All this mess, this horrible mess. And I've cleaned up messes before, but from an adult human being, you don't want to clean up these messes. Anyway, so we got him to the hospital. Hospice agreed to take him on. We got him back, is the story I told you. And we actually cleaned out that chair. He had cushions and stuff on it, so we had to burn those. We burned them. And we cleaned up everything else. The chair's still usable. And what we used to do is we put a seatbelt in the chair because we knew he wouldn't go to bed. He wouldn't go in this bed. For some reason, he didn't like this bed. So he would sleep in his chair, and he would say, well, there's bugs in that bed. There's bugs there. I've got to check the bugs. I got to check the bugs. So he kept picking at his leg, saying, you got to examine these under a microscope because there's bugs in them. We're like, no, there are no bugs. We took him to the doctor at the hospital in Ruby. They checked his legs, like, no, there are no bugs in your legs. Like, well, you guys know what you're talking about. There's bugs in my legs. So more porter salve. I mean, we bought basically a whole factory of porter salve. A lot of it. I think we could have stacked the whole house with porter salve cans. We get him back. He can't walk. So we have to get a wheelchair. We have to get a man lift. And so we lift him up, and they got a catheter in him because we can't get him to the bathroom because he can't walk. So he knows this. He knows this happened to him. And as we go further on into 2021, remember he dies May 29th in 2021. So as further we go on, the more he forgets and the more he gets dementia. We try to take him out in his wheelchair, walk him around. I sang we had fun, we had joy, we had fun, we had seasons in the sun. Really depressing song, but it's what I thought about because he kind of enjoyed the time we had.
Say video for you. Say hi to you, Jay.
Say hi to your son. He's gonna send him
Say hi to Jim. Say hi to Jim.
Videotaping.
Hi, Jim and Lisa and Willis and Daniel.
Well, we would put him out in his crane. Basically, we'd crane him, put him in the living room, and eventually he started trying to get up, and he couldn't get up. And me and my brother-in-law and I had to tell him, dude, you can't walk. You can't walk. And he got into fits. He wouldn't go to sleep. We gave him different types of drugs. Hospice would give him different drugs. He wouldn't go to sleep. So at 3 a.m, we have the baby monitors watching him, and he's pulling at his catheter, trying to jank his catheter out. Takes his oxygen and bends it all up and tangles it all up, and he tries to get out of the bed. He scoots his butt down to the edge of the bed, trying to jump out of the bed. So Nell and I have to go down repeatedly over and over again, get him back in his bed, clean him back up, because he would smush poop all over himself yeah, it was horrible. I wouldn't wish this on anybody, but I wouldn't wish that you would make someone from a healthcare agency do it, because they took care of you when you were a baby. The least you can do is take care of them when they're dying. And he was dying. He would think that Nell and I were orderlies, and he would say, so what facility is this? Or, I need to call my family. And I'm like, Jim, this is your daughter. This is Nell, your daughter. Because he thought we were orderlies. So eventually he started feeling like he was trapped, and I would argue with him, or I would talk to him. I would relay the story of what happened repeatedly, because he would forget it from one night to the next. He would if he slept through the night, he would remember what happened. But when he did this stuff and tried to keep himself awake, he would go nuts. He would be crazy. That's the only word to put it. I mean, dementia, I've never seen it, but he would not sleep. Come to find out, he's had this neuroses all his life. He doesn't sleep. And I don't know how that's even possible. He stayed up for 72 hours one time, and Nell and I had to stay up for 72 hours. It's crazy. It's like, dude, you need to sleep. And he wouldn't sleep. He would pretend to sleep, We'd go upstairs, and then he'd be yanking at his catheter, yanking at his oxygen, tearing it apart. Nell would come in there to try to get him to stop, and I was trying to sleep for work. He would start getting violent with her, so I had to come down, and he would try to wring her wrists to hurt her on purpose. And so I grabbed his hands. He tried to wring my wrist. I'm like, nah, it's not gonna work with me, dude. I'm like, you better back off. So I had to tell my father-in-law to back off, and actually yelled at him because he was trying to hurt Nell. He was trying to hit her. And I'm like, no, not in my house. You're not doing that. I don't care how much dementia you have. You are not doing that. So whenever Nell woke up, I had to get up, and I stayed with him. I sat in a chair in the corner of this room, and he would explain it. He would say, why are we keeping prisoner? I just walked last week. I know I walked last week. I'm like, no, it's been 2 months since you walked. It's been 3 months since you walked. It's been 4 months since you walked. And he says, well, why are you doing this to me? I'm like, dude, it's your plan. You were the one who devised this plan. We were supposed to take care of you until you died, and you're dying now. All indications are hospice is telling us you are dying. And by the way, now that he couldn't do the Porter salve, Nell was actually fixing his legs. We found some fungus medicine, and it went away. The legs became healed. Until he tried to walk. He talked me and Jim, my brother-in-law, into getting him like, okay, you don't believe me, so we're going to get you up, and you're going to try to walk. And I said, if you can walk on your own without me, you can walk. So we set him up in the crane, got him in the chair, his wife's chair that we've had. We call it the magic chair, because if you sit in it, you get rid of your headaches. So he was holding on to me, trying to get up. He couldn't, his legs kept wobbling, going sideways, and he couldn't get up. I had to pick him up and put him back in the chair. And then when Jim came over the next weekend, we told him what happened. And then his legs, they all got bruised, blood stains. The blood was pooling because he broke blood vessels trying to stand up. So he cannot stand up, but he thinks he can. So Jim comes over, and I talk with Jim, and we say, well, let's let him try it one more time. And Nell was getting mad at us. She was getting pissed at me and Jim. What are you guys doing? You know he can't walk. I'm like, yeah, but he doesn't. It's like, we can at least try it one more time. So we tried it one more time, and we prayed, saying maybe God will let him walk. And he didn't. So from that point on, I had to keep telling him stories about what happened. Like at 3 a.m, I would sit and I would tell him, this is what happened. This is what happened. It's your plan. And he would say, well, I'm changing the plan. I'm like, no, dude, Section 8, you are no longer in charge. You have given up your right to command anything. I'm like, especially since you broke the remote, you broke your computer. And he would always ask to finish his Bible timeline that he worked for 10 years on. And if we let him use his computer to work on it, he would screw up his Bible timeline that he worked 10 years on. So we had to keep that away from him. And basically we got to the point where he was watching Shaun the Sheep every time, and Discovery Channel. And I think there was Pacifier. He would watch Pacifier over and over. Secondhand Lions, he'd watch it over and over and over and over and over. We tried to watch a regular movie with him. He would get distracted and do other things. But
The Chosen for me once.
yeah, we played The Chosen. He enjoyed that when he could watch it. Then he said, okay, good, let's get up. And he tried to get up out of his seat. We had to park an ottoman underneath the recliner so that he couldn't push it down. But over and over and over again, 3 a.m, telling him the story over and over and over again. And then sometimes they'd find a drug that would help him sleep. Nell and I would get maybe a day of sleep before he fought that off and learned how to stay awake. And I said, no, I know your neuroses was fine for you. It allowed you to work more hours than any man conceivably could. I don't like your neuroses. I can't go without sleep. And I said, stop fighting sleep. I think the reason that he fought sleep, and I think this is for most of his life, he had nightmares. He had problems in his brain that he had to work out, and he would not sleep because he did not want to see those images in his head. So Barb, Leanne, Ron, Henry, if you guys know what he went through in his past, something was very traumatic that he couldn't sleep. He wouldn't allow himself to sleep, and we couldn't sleep. Anyway, in all of this, when I would talk to him and I would reason with him, and he would tell me stories like, let's talk about Leanne, let's talk about Barb, let's talk about Ron, let's talk about Henry. And he would relate the times when you were kids and talk about what his father did. Like the one time I think he killed a horse because the horse bit him or did something to him, or he punched the horse, or I can't remember what Arthur Voss did. But he did something to a horse, and Arthur Voss was as stubborn as his son Jim. From what Jim was telling me, Arthur Voss was about crankier than Jim was, which is hard to believe because Jim was pretty cranky. So the point of my whole argument, the whole point of he finally died May 29th. I was on the phone with really good friends of his Daryl and Kim, and I was trying to get Kim to stop talking to me because the hospice person was telling us that he's only got an hour. He's only got 2 hours left. He's only got an hour. He's about 15 minutes away. And the great thing it was that Nella and Jim got to be with their dad when he was passing away. He didn't feel too much pain. He really wasn't coherent at the time. The last coherent time he had was probably 2 days before. Like I said, when he went to sleep, his brain reset and he was fine. He could think, he could reason. He would have Ian help him with his computer, or Joel help him with his computer, or Joel would watch movies with him. Sometimes Sam would watch movies with him. And we did Shabbat. We gathered around his hospital bed and we prayed with him. And he told me all these stories about you guys and your family. I guess my family. He was truly a gifted man. And he was truly a good man. But he had a dark, dark side to him. And I'm thinking about dementia. I'm thinking, why does God let that happen to someone who's Christian? Now, I tell you, when you're getting ready to die and you're getting close to death, you better have told everyone all your secrets. Everything that you want to hide from somebody, everything that you say, well, I'm actually this type of person, and you're going to see that when you're taking care of me. Because the shield comes down. It's funny that we were during COVID. You had to wear a mask during COVID for whatever reason. They were stupid. But your mask that you wear every day, and you might not think you're wearing one. You might think, I'm a good person. I don't have a mask. I don't have a dark side. I'm a good person. Yeah? Then why do people with dementia swear like a sailor and say all sorts of evil, bad things when they're on their last legs? Why? It's because that person that you pushed down, that you've hidden all this time, is going to come up. And I pray that maybe I'll just die like with my boots on, and my kids won't have to take care of me, so they won't have to know all that shit, because I got a lot of shit way up in there, and it is nasty. I told them some of it, but they don't know the half of it. I tried to live my life for Abba, for God. And Jim tried to live his life for God. But when he got dementia, his shield came down. He was a violent, angry person. There's no hiding it. He was. But his mind gave him the ability to fight it. Like, he carried this person around inside of him for his entire life. And he was able to fight it for all that time. He was able to hold back the insanity for 60, 65, 68 years. I mean, when he was getting a little older, a little bit of the insanity was getting out, and sometimes when he would come home from a long trip, he would drive Mudu or Diane crazy, and she wished he would go again. But he held back the insanity for most of the part of his life, and I admire him for that. And when you're in dementia, you can't hold it back. That mask will go. His mother-in-law, Carol, Diane's mom, when she got dementia, she became the little girl that she always wanted to be, but she always had to be prim and proper, and she always had to be, serious. Well, when Nell got to know her a little bit when she had dementia, she became this cute girl that was very friendly and very naive and very, girlish. She was funny. Nell was asking her about her grandfather, and it had a picture of him, Wayne. Nell's like, he's a handsome guy, isn't he? And Carol grins, and she goes, yes, he is. During the time that I knew them, she was always on Wayne about different things. She was always serious. Wayne was always like matter of fact. Wayne was pretty cool. He was blind, but he still had a fighting spirit. So I digress. I'll get back to it. So I asked God in the days that we were going through this mess, why would you let this happen? A guy who is truly following after you. I mean, he started following Torah. He started becoming Messianic. He remembered that his parents were Seventh-day Adventists. He remembered that Sabbath was still Saturday. And he actually figured out the day that Christ was actually crucified and the day that Christ actually rose. I can't prove it, but I know that it makes sense. I was able to prove it one time, but I've lost information in the time we've had when we're moving, and all the information and documents got all mixed up. But Yeshua, Jesus, died on a Wednesday. Yeshua, Jesus, raised on Sabbath. He was the Lord of the Sabbath. He wasn't raised on Sunday. Anyway, he spent his time researching, trying to figure things out, trying to figure out where other people have been misguided, where other people have mistranslated or misinterpreted or misappropriated the words of God. He spent a lot of his life doing that. And I've had some revelations that I could tell him that he was able to figure it out. Like I asked God something and God would tell me. And then the first words I blurted out when I saw Jim was, Psalm 89. He's like, that's it. And he would go to his book, he would go to his video, he'd look Perry Stone for a minute, and he's like, yeah, watch this. And so the thing that I showed him was actually something he was looking for. So God worked with me and Jim together. I know that he was a man of God. So when he broke down and had dementia, I asked God, why would you do this to somebody who clearly loves you, clearly has been fighting this all his life, and clearly has been winning the battle against this insanity all his life? And in a way, I found out that I have my own insanity that I'm going to have to deal with when I get dementia, if I get dementia.
Hopefully not.
I hope not, but if I get it, I'm going to scare the hell out of people. And I'm violent. I am an angry man. I can take orders, though. I'm not like Jim. He doesn't. I said, Section 8, you're no longer in charge of the remote, you are no longer in charge of the computer, and you are no longer in charge of you. Now turn over so now I can wipe your butt. That's basically the way it was. We tried to spend time with him. We tried to feed him. We tried to get up when he was trying to do something nasty or evil and crumble up his oxygen hose, try to break Nell's wrists, try to punch her in the face. And when I came by, he thought I was an orderly because he thought I was a big orderly. I'm like, I'm your son-in-law. I've known you for over 25 years, dude. He's like, oh. So I had to remind him, but why would God let somebody who is clearly in the book of life, who clearly loves them, who clearly is trying to follow God's will, why would he let that happen? Why would he let them lose their dignity? I mean, you're like a baby again. I had to take care of a naked grown man. And now I had to take care of her father, naked grown man. And that he would have when he could be in a wheelchair and move himself around or in his chair, he would have his urinal with him all the time because he always thought he had to pee. And he started peeing at the table while we're there trying to pretend he wasn't doing it. We're like, no, dude, get out of here. You don't pee at the table. I don't care if you got dementia or not. Stop peeing at the table. Crazy things that I would never, ever think about are things that we had to go through. I'm like, God, why would you do that to him? Why would you take his dignity away like that? He said, I didn't do it for him. I did it for you. So a lot of people think that taking care of your parents when they're dying is a burden, is evil. It's something that should never happen to them. Why should I take care of my parents when I can put them in a home or they can die in a hospital like everything else? Would you want to die alone in a hospital with people who want to see you dead? I mean, really? Who you push the button, they never come. You got to go pee, and they never come, so they make you pee in your bed. I mean, there's a lot of hospital workers that are great and that really care, but the system as a whole is not set up for you as a patient. The whole Rockefeller system is haphazard. That's in a whole other conspiracy theory video about the Rockefeller medical system. But taking care of your parents when they're dying is a blessing. And I know what I just said doesn't sound like a blessing. Like, how is that a blessing? Wrestling with your father-in-law when he tries to hurt his daughter, or having to take care of a naked old grown man, clean him up when he poops, when he vomits, when he pulls his catheter out, there's blood everywhere. How is that a blessing? Well, it wasn't for his dignity, it was for ours. It was for my wife's, it was for me, it was for my brother-in-law. I guess I'm reminded of a line from Lord of the Rings, where he says, Captain Faramir, a chance to prove his worth. When Faramir said, if there needs to go to Rivendell, I can go in Boromir's stead. Faramir was willing to do the hard stuff so that he can show his worth. Faramir did end up showing his worth because he rejected the ring. gave it back to Frodo and let Frodo go on his way. In a way, taking care of your parents, not even your parents, somebody you met 25 years ago who became your father-in-law, a total stranger back in before 1995. Dignity wasn't for him. He'd had his time. He was going to go to eternal rest. He was going to see Yeshua. He actually did talk to Yeshua before he died. He talked to Diane. He talked to Yeshua. I believe that God lets your loved ones come to let you know what's going to happen and to let you know that you don't need to be afraid. He was not afraid of death. In fact, he embraced death. He had done his job. He had done his mission. I think when he got there, Yeshua said, "Well done, faithful servant." But while he was going through dementia, Nell and I were getting a chance to prove our worth, to take care of somebody who needed taken care of. And we could have chose to send him to a home. We could have chose to try to pawn him off on one of his family members, but they wouldn't have done what we did. And they wouldn't have been his advocate. They wouldn't have cared about him as much as we did. I know you guys say, how could you care about my brother more than I can? I don't know. He became my really good friend. I mean, he was my father-in-law, but he was one of my best friends in the world. I'm sorry that he had to go, but the way that he did go, it gave me strength. It gave Nell strength. And it gave us dignity. And it gave Jim dignity. And I think that's why God lets us go nuts before we die, so that the ones we love, the ones who claim to love us, can really show that they do love us. And they do show that they do love you when they take care of you, even though you don't know it. I mean, you take care of someone and you get no reward. You get no satisfaction from them because they don't know what you're doing. But just the times that I had with him that I could pick his brain when his brain was still there and gather dignity from the fact that I know that I can do the hard stuff. I pray my kids have the strength to do what I did. I don't wish it on them. I'd rather die in battle or something, but if I gotta die a pathetic old man, I guess it wouldn't hurt dying the way Jim did. I definitely don't want to die in a hospital. But anyway, dignity. God told me. He says, I didn't do it for Jim's dignity. I did it for yours. And that's the end of what is dignity. You can make out of this what you wish. Thank you. This is also a memorial to James Arthur Voss, one of my best friends in the world, who also happens to be my father-in-law. And he is written in the book of life. So we will see him again.
Are you?
19.
Are you? How old will you be when you're 193?
Obviously 193. Thumbs up.
Hey.
Hey.
Fonzie.
Fonzie. Do the tap on the wall, make the lights on.